Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to ELTea Time MENA, our coffee break style advancing learning podcast series, where for each episode I am joined by a guest, an educator from right here in the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa. And together we're going to engage in a 30-minute or so discussion on a contemporary topic of their choosing over a nice cup of tea. Today, well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nathan, and I am the teacher trainer for Macmillan Education here in MENA. And today I am joined by, I think, MENA's all-time favorite teacher trainer. I was going to say second favorite after myself, but I thought people might not get the joke. No, this is MENA's all-time favorite teacher trainer, of course, Anna Hasper. Anna, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and thanks, Nathan, for that lovely introduction. And yeah, lovely to be here. Very excited to talk to you.
We're super pleased to have you with us. Okay, so let me describe Anna, or give you a brief about Anna if you don't know her, if you've never come across her before. Anna's a primary trained ELT teacher from New Zealand, and she's been based in Dubai for quite a long time, I think. She's worked as a teacher of young learners and of adults, and is a teacher trainer on Cambridge accredited courses, both face-to-face and online. She's a self-confessed addict to learning, or addict of learning, one of the two. She's passionate about enabling teachers to enhance effective learning for all learners. Nice and inclusive. I like that, Anna. Perfect. She regularly presents internationally. She's written a ton of stuff. If you've never seen it, she's all over the place. English teaching professional, modern English teacher. I've read your articles on there. She's got lots of special interests, traveling being one of them, teacher development, educational psychology, and enhancing effective learning. Anna, we are honored, I think, to have you on the podcast today. I think before we get going, though, of course, ELT time, our tradition is to announce our hot drink of choice. You are drinking tea, I think, aren't you?
I am. Actually, I like the smell of coffee, but I just can't drink it. So I always have tea. Yeah.
I didn't know that. What type of tea have you got?
It's special today. It's Rooibos, Red Bush from South Africa. I don't know if you're familiar with Rooibos.
I am, but I don't know if the people listening are.
It's actually...
Does anybody know Rooibos?
Oh, sorry.
No, go on. Tell us about Rooibos.
It's a South African tea, and my South African friends are always saying it's actually for children. I don't know if there's anyone here who knows more about that, but it's a very warm tea, so I think it's great for winter. And the good thing about it, it's not made of tea leaves. It's all made of the bush, so it hasn't got any caffeine in it.
Yeah, I tend to drink Rooibos in the evenings, so I have caffeine-free evenings. So I drink coffee in the morning and tea in the afternoon, Rooibos in the evening. Because, like I say, it's got no caffeine. But for me, it's 12:30 in the morning, so I have tea with caffeine, I think. Well, I'm assuming this has got caffeine in it. It's fruit. I've gone for fruit tea again today. I've got strawberry and raspberry tea.
Ooh.
Nice punchy fruit tea for the morning.
So it's a red tea as well, if you look at the colour, really.
It is red, yeah, very deep red. It's nice. It's a bit hot because I just made it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, sorry, go on. I'm interrupting you. Go on, go. What were you going to say?
No, nothing. Oh, you go.
Okay, good. The guys who are in the chat box, please do let us know what you are drinking as well. If you're joining us on your tea break or lunch break and you're having a cup of tea or coffee, do let us know in the chat box what you're drinking as well. And maybe you've got some tea that you'd like to recommend to us. I'm always on the lookout for new teas. Each ELT time I've had something different. I've had jasmine tea, a couple of fruit teas, breakfast tea. I'm going to try some bubble tea soon. That was my promise, but I couldn't get any this morning. So high tea. Okay, interesting. I'll have to look that one up. But there's loads of great teas, so let us know what you are drinking. Okay, so Anna, are you ready to get going? Should we talk about
I am. Ready when you're ready.
So today's topic is all about advancing well-being in teaching, in learning, in schools, in education in general. Before we start, if anybody in the chat box wants to share with us today, if you have any questions or if you want to share your experiences, things like how do you look after yourself? How do you ensure your students look after themselves? How do you ensure your students feel like less of a statistic and more of an integrated person within the classroom. Let us know in the chat box any questions we will address towards the end. We chose this topic, Anna and I, because earlier this year, we created a series of handbooks for teachers called Advancing Learning, Your Guide to Teacher Development. There were 6 of them in total, and each one of them focused on one of the advancing learning themes. I was responsible for one. I did the inclusion one, and Anna wrote and compiled, actually Anna compiled all of them, but Anna wrote the one for advancing well-being. So we thought, who better to invite to the podcast to talk about this topic of well-being, of mindfulness. So I'm going to read the opening statement, or a part of the opening statement from that handbook. And if you haven't seen that handbook yet, I'm going to send it to everybody who's registered for today's podcast. And we're also streaming on Facebook. So if you're watching now on the live Facebook page, put your name, just your name, into the chat box, and I will get in touch with you as well to send you that handbook if you haven't already seen it. So here's the opening statement. It says, looking after your well-being is key if you want to live life to its fullest. Well-being relates to how we feel, physically, mentally, and emotionally, not only in our professional context, but also in our personal life. To promote positive emotions and an overall sense of life satisfaction, it is important to explore different ways of enhancing a sense of well-being for teachers and students. Practicing mindfulness and developing social and emotional skills can strengthen various aspects that contribute to a satisfied life. It's a lovely little opening paragraph, I think, for that handbook. And I'm going to get started and invite Anna in. So, Anna, my first question to you. So I guess I want to explore the idea of practicing mindfulness first a little bit more. When I think of well-being kind of makes sense to me. Like, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm not ill, I'm not too stressed at the moment. So I'm doing okay, I'm feeling okay. But mindfulness is a little trickier. It's a little bit more vague to me. That opening paragraph is actually a lot longer, and further down in it, you mention about how teachers and students as well can practice or develop this skill, this mindfulness skill. So I'd like to know a little bit more from you about how we can practice this, how we can develop it, and how mindfulness perhaps fits into this kind of bigger well-being picture overall.
Lovely. I think that those are excellent questions, Nathan. And I can already see in the chat box as well that for well-being, we know quite well what it relates to is like regular exercise, eating healthy food. It's got to do often with that physical, emotional, mental well-being. But mindfulness, indeed, it fits within that. It helps you to become or to develop better well-being. But maybe I should start explaining what we actually mean when we talk about mindfulness. Would that be a good idea?
That would be useful for you, even for me. I think that would be useful.
Yeah, so if you look at mindfulness, it actually means that you're being in the moment, that you're having an awareness of your emotions, your surroundings, and your bodily sensations now at this moment. So it's actually all about directing your focus to be truly aware of the here and now. Now, that might sound a bit vague and really easy as well, because we are here. But actually, if you look at research, the brain is a very busy organ, and it's quite often thinking about the past. It's maybe worrying, what happened? Did I do the right thing? Or it's either worrying or thinking about the future, what we should or shouldn't do. So particularly, I think, in our modern day society where life is really, really busy, it's actually very hard to stay in the here and now and be aware of what your feelings are, how your body feels, and what your emotions actually are telling you. So that's actually why we call it a skill, because you have to develop that ability to check in with yourselves. I don't know if it makes sense, but a very good example, and I'm pretty sure that most of us can actually identify with this. I don't know, sometimes you leave the house, you walk to the car, you open the car door, you sit in the car, put your cup of tea in the holder, and you think, did I actually lock the front door? I don't know if you recognize this.
All the time, yes. I did it yesterday.
Serious?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just such, it's a routine that we have, and routines are good because the brain likes routines. It makes it easy and it frees up space for other things in our brain. But it actually means that you were not very mindful because you are not there. Your mind is off, maybe thinking about the route you're going to take or what you're going to say in the meeting. So you're not really present in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. Thankfully, I live in Dubai, so I actually just left the door unlocked and went out. Good old Dubai. This is why we love Dubai.
I know, I think we haven't got a lot to worry about that, but there might be other things that you think, have I fed the dog or something, then it becomes a bit more of a serious issue, I think.
It does. So it sounds a little bit like we're talking about, from a student point of view, getting students when they come into a classroom focused. I mean, that's always been there, right? This idea of making sure when students come in that they're present in the classroom, and that's the core part of their focus is on the content of the lesson and making sure that they're learning and moving forward. It sounds a little bit like that, mindfulness, to me.
I think that is probably true. It's maybe something that we have done in our classrooms for a much longer time than the word mindfulness is around, because that might be something we haven't labeled. But I do think there is a slight difference. As soon as they're present, we give them activities to do. But the most important thing for you to realize as a teacher is, what are the kids actually thinking about in their brain? Are they worrying about the test they're going to get tomorrow? Are they worrying about the test they're going to get back that they did last week? So that mindfulness in a teaching and learning context is really, as a teacher, to be aware of the fact what stresses their brain.
Yeah.
And how can we sort of regulate those emotions so they don't get upset, they're not going to throw a tantrum. How can we refocus their attention on what they're doing now and feel less overwhelmed by the past and the future so their brain can be calm? Because I don't know how much you know about your brain. I love brain research, and that's definitely one of my favorite topics to read about. If your brain is not calm, if it's worried, if it's stressed, there is no space in it to actually think, to learn. So you're really not enabling your learners for success if they're not having a calm brain.
Exactly. They cannot maximize on their time and the input. Yeah. Actually, you just listening to you there. It also reminds me a little bit of certain aspects of meditation, right? Because meditation is not about switching your brain off. It's about focusing on one thing, a single thing. That's a key part of meditation, right? You probably know more about that than I do.
Yeah, and meditation as well. It's actually really difficult. I don't know if you have tried to meditate, but you sometimes, depends where you do it or what sort of courses you follow. You sit there for 45 minutes and you just go into yourself, but you're trying not to think about your shopping list or your holiday plans or what to eat for Christmas. It's really difficult. And you're also not trying not to fall asleep. And I find that really hard. So it is really being in your body and being present and focusing attention on the now. It's not so easy, interestingly.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, and like you say, really difficult to do. I mean, maybe the guys who are joining us today, does anybody here practice like meditation? What strategies do you have for this mindfulness for narrowing down your focus and attention, and removing some of those other stressful things so that you can concentrate on. It doesn't have to be teaching; it could be anything in life, really. And actually, something else just came to my mind based on something you were saying about students, and the stresses that they bring to the classroom. And obviously, there's been a lot of stress from a lot of different things recently. But again, I would say that this emphasizes the need for developing that homeschool connection. So finding out about what's going on with them outside of the classroom, and how that might affect what goes on inside of the classroom. I feel like I bring it up every podcast, this homeschool connection, but it's one of the most difficult aspects, I think, for teachers, but also I think one of the most profitable, if you can pull it off.
It's that interconnectedness, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And particularly when you work with young learners, I think that is possibly even more important. So one of the things that if you want to get that interconnectedness, very simple homework tasks for children to do in times that parents are working from home and super stressed, and also developing this mindfulness, is to give them a task to do some mindful listening. So it could be young learners, it could be teenagers, it can be adults. I mean, I use it sometimes too, and it's fascinating. You just go and sit somewhere quietly and start to listen attentively to what you actually hear around you. There's so many sounds that we don't hear if you don't focus on it. Might be a bird, might be my neighbour, sorry, I think he's sanding his floor next door. So if you hear something, and really acknowledging those sounds. And with young learners, I often get them to not close their eyes, but just listen, have some paper, have a pen, and listen to all those sounds and draw what you hear. So you can use a color, it can be an image, it can use a shape or an icon, and they're really so focused and calm, and it really calms them and their brain down. It settles them quite nicely.
Okay. Yeah, nice. We've actually, I was going to move on to social and emotional learning next, and we've kind of already started to delve into this topic, I think, with what we're talking about there. The questions that I have around social and emotional learning, they've become quite prominent quite more recently, especially with COVID coming up. Social and emotional learning has really kind of come to the forefront of discussions within education. Do you think that there is still enough focus on social and emotional learning? And I guess another part of that is, if you think that there isn't, what can teachers do to improve or integrate more social and emotional learning into their teaching and learning?
Right. Loads of questions. I don't know if my brain registers all, but you might have to repeat the second
one at a time. I can go back on.
The first thing I think is really interesting that you say it's becoming a lot more popular, let's put it that way, but it's not something new at all. It was developed in the 1960s in the US. It might not have had the label. I think the label social emotional learning, that was coined in 1994. So it's actually quite an old thing. And you know Bloom, right, from the taxonomy of learning?
Of course, everybody here will know Bloom, I'm sure of it.
So we all know about Bloom. I'm not going to say the pyramid because it actually isn't a pyramid, but he's got all these different stages of thinking. But he actually also wrote advice for educational activities. So in his eyes, there are 3 domains of educational activities we teachers need to ensure our learners develop through schooling. And one of them, of course, is the cognitive skills, academic skills and knowledge. Then also when you have younger learners and even teenagers, you're working on those psychomotor skills. With very young learners, maybe those fine motor skills or physical development of your learners. And the last thing he wrote, and I think this is around 1960 as well, he mentioned that as teachers, we really need to make sure that we develop learners' abilities to deal with their emotions, their feelings, so we can create an attitude towards learning that is positive and beneficial. So effective skills development. And this is when? In the 1960s. And here we are. Now it's becoming more and more popular. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to judge, really, if we do this enough. I don't think that's my role. But if you ask me for my personal opinion, I think I've seen it a lot in primary school curriculums and secondary mainstream. But in that way, the ELT industry came maybe a little bit late to the game.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, however, there are some amazing course books available now that really integrate all this social and emotional learning into the English language teaching environment. And it's just so important for learners to develop that self-awareness, that self-management, so they can regulate their emotions, but also that relating to others, I think, is really important. Not only in the classroom, but also to navigate all those experiences and challenges they're going to get in daily life. Yeah. And then I don't know what your second question was. Am I actually answering your question, Nathan?
The second one was around, improving or integrating, which I think you've answered. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of really good social and emotional content within course books, ELT course books now. Maybe the guys who are joining us from Qatar can tell us their opinions about using that social and emotional content with their students. It'd be really interesting to get that feedback, whether they like it, whether it makes sense, whether those values come through, whether we're missing something. That would be really interesting to find out. So please do feel free, guys, to write in the chat box how you feel about that. But yeah, this idea of self-awareness, I think it is very important. I mean, like I say, it's been
one
around.
other thing I like to add, and this is something for us, particularly when you teach teens and young learners, if you look at research, developing those skills, like you said, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, decision-making and relating to others, it actually means that our students' social behavior improves. Once they have those skills, the behavioral issues in your classroom are actually reduced. So that is really good for us to know because it facilitates our classroom management. So yeah, I think it's a really important area to integrate.
Yes.
There are different ways we can do that. And
for example?
I think the most important thing, and I'm probably sure you agree with me on that one, for us is to be a role model as a teacher. It really surprises me when I observe a class where they are trying to integrate some of these skills and the teacher completely loses it and starts shouting, because you do see that happen. And it's normal. It happens to all of us. But I think we need to be very aware of our role there. You know, what we say, what we do, what we don't say, and what we don't do. Our students quite often copy that behavior.
Yeah, and again, I think I brought this up before, that role modeling is not just how you interact, but it's planning at the admin level. So all of the teachers having a coordinated approach and leadership overseeing that. How are we going to role model certain aspects of whether it's social and emotional behavior, or whether it's learning, or whether it's behavior outside of the classroom? I think, a really coordinated approach to that. Because otherwise, one teacher does one, especially if it's in things like secondary, where students have more than one teacher for different subjects. It sends mixed messages if one of them says, insists that you have to say thank you to everything, and another one says, it doesn't really matter, I don't really care about that. I think it's really good to have that coordinated approach.
And I think that is maybe why in ELT it hasn't developed as quickly possibly as in mainstream, because there is often a whole school approach. The whole school follows a certain philosophy in teaching. In New Zealand, for example, looking at the primary curriculum, it's really heavily underpinned by social emotional criteria. Yeah. So everything you do as a teacher, as a whole school, it's like questioning, would you like to be treated like that? No, it's okay. What can we change next time? How can you show being friendly to others? So everything you do in those lessons is focused on that actually more holistic approach to education.
Yeah, I would agree. And sometimes ELT struggles with that a little bit, especially in the private sector, because when I think about when I went to school, it was the same, this kind of holistic underpinning social and emotional development running through everything that we were doing. But again, setting us things to do outside of the classroom, like how do we behave outside of the classroom? ELT sometimes has that, what goes on in the classroom is what we're supposed to be dealing with. And that's changing a little bit as well, which is a good thing, I think.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't need to be super advanced if it's not in your course book. We have picture books for children. You can ask questions about the character. How would he feel? How can we make him feel better? To raise that awareness in young learners. Teenagers, role plays. I mean, pair work and group work, project work, where they have to collaborate, listen to each other, and come to a solution together in a polite and friendly way. And even, I don't know how you feel about that, with adult learners, I think focusing on active listening, for example, is invaluable and a skill that's very much needed, I think, in our busy lives.
You just reminded me, actually, where I attended the Wellbeing with Teens webinar that was on last week with Kate Pickering, and she was talking about getting teen students to be able to empathize with another point of view. And she gave the example of making noise on a bus, I think it was. And I wrote in the chat box, like, this is the perfect opportunity for a role play. So make the classroom into a pretend bus. Give some of them almost like spy roles. So take 2 or 3 of them to one side and give them a role that they have to play to almost antagonize the other students into seeing what it would be like to be on the other side of these things. And that's such, and I've taught teams, and I used to do that kind of thing. It's just setting all the chairs in lines, giving a few roles to different people and seeing where it goes. And again, seeing what language comes out of that. But yeah, getting them to see different points of view, getting them to empathize, getting them to see how emotions could get out of control quite quickly, and then having discussions around that, and then having a debate at the end. How did you feel? What could have happened? What could you have done to calm this situation down? These are really great activities for young learners and teens. Really great activities, I always found.
Yeah, it's very memorable because all of us in the classroom looks really weird. It's like a bus. We're getting lots of noise. But yet, stepping in their shoes or stepping in someone else's shoes, those activities are really good for empathy and a bit of compassion. But I think what you said, the invaluable bit of this whole fun experience of shouting in the classroom is really to reflect afterwards on, okay, so how would you feel if someone would do that to you? And this is where you create that social awareness, and hopefully that awareness that learners actually start to think outside of the classroom about their behavior as well.
Yeah. Okay, so the example we've just been giving there has been a face-to-face example, and it's easier, I think, to tackle social and emotional development and social and emotional learning and mindfulness in the presence of students. But obviously we know that over the last year and a half, 2 years, there's been a lot of a move to kind of online learning, distance teaching. And I think that there is a danger within online learning that it can become a little bit detached. We're really frantically trying to cover our content, the vocabulary in the 45 minutes that we may or may not be behind that black dot on the screen. So it could be impersonal. So you've done a lot of online teaching recently. I know you've done other courses online. You've done other courses in an online with people all over the world. So from your experience, how do you ensure well-being in an online teaching and learning context? Do you do things differently? Do you consider things differently than you would face-to-face? And I guess another question, so I keep asking loads of questions within one.
Let me write this down.
Yeah. Does everybody struggle? Does everybody in an online learning experience feel isolated, or do some of the students actually prefer it?
Okay, let me start with that last one then, because that is really interesting. Some people absolutely struggle. They feel lonely, isolated. And when you ask them about their experience, some research I did early on last year, they felt really like no more part of this family, because the classroom becomes their own culture, right? So I think particularly for teenagers, that was really, really difficult. But there is actually evidence that learners, certain kinds of learners, prefer working from behind a screen. I think the research I read was about ADHD students. They didn't have the distractions, and they felt a lot safer to actually voice their opinion being behind that screen. They didn't have everything going on around them that was distracting them. So for some learners, it's been a really positive experience. Whereas others, like you said, they're isolated.
I would agree, yeah. Autism, Asperger's, anyone who struggles in highly vibrant social scenarios. I put that quite nicely, didn't I? Actually, surprised myself then. But yeah, anyone who struggles with those types of things, I think, has really benefited. I actually read something else the other day that I think it was high school students were complaining about going back to face-to-face teaching because they got used to speed reading. So they were listening to audiobooks, and they were turning up the speed to, I think it was 1.7.
Oh my goodness.
And apparently maybe it was 1.4, but they were saying that they can remember, and they were saying that they're finding it really hard to go back into the classroom and do the listening activities at regular speed. They were like, this is taking forever. So it's really interesting how this has thrown up all these different ways of thinking about doing stuff in the classroom, for me anyway.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because I actually say I'm guilty of this as well, because when I watch webinars, like the one last week with Kate, I watched half of it and then the other half later. And I put it up to 1.5 as well, because I can get more done in my day.
Yes, there you go. So that's so interesting. No one would have ever thought of that, I think, in the actual classroom before COVID. It's so interesting.
Definitely.
Okay, so What about the second part? So how do you ensure this well-being? How do you promote well-being?
I think that it depends on the group of learners you have. It depends on how much time you spend together. But for me, there's two things that are really important. The checking in with my learners. So I make sure that I log on 10 minutes early in every session. They can come in if they want to, have a chat together about, I don't know, their cup of tea or something they bought. Just the chance to have actually that unplanned time, which you normally get in the hallway when you walk to school. We don't have that. So a bit of chatting time. I've got an open Zoom room once a week. There's an hour and they can come if they want to. They don't need to. They can bring up issues they want to talk about. And of course, the other thing that is maybe even more important now than it would be in a face-to-face classroom is to ensure that you support your learners and that you create that optimal state for the brain to learn, that sense of belonging. So really working on group cohesion, building rapport, so my students feel physically distanced, but not really socially distanced. So a lot of get to know you activities, a lot of group and pair work, and also online after the face-to-face lesson we have online. I get them to do tasks asynchronously together on a Padlet or maybe in a Google Doc, so they actually feel that they're still connected to the others. And I've made a much bigger point of that now than I used to do in the past.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think you're totally right about this idea of connection. So even if they're not seeing each other face to face, finding new ways to connect students, because it doesn't always have to be from us promoting. I think people think that promoting well-being is us doing stuff, like you said, checking in with students. But actually, it could be setting up systems where they can connect with each other and talk about things outside of the classroom, because that is an aspect that they might miss as well, I think. They feel like they have to do everything by themselves. And of course, that's what we want to break down in teaching and learning. We want them to collaborate. We want them to share their ideas. We want them to be interacting with each other, because that obviously gives them a lot more opportunities to use language, to develop ideas, to, again, empathize. So yeah, find ways of getting them to connect to each other. And that could be in online social spaces that you could set up for them and then just let them kind of see where they go with it, I guess. Another aspect, I think, sorry, are you going to make a comment on that? Go for it, you can.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with the use of technology, I think what we need to consider as teachers or educators is that we've used it in a certain way for so long, but you really need to figure out what the affordances are so you can actually use it in a slightly different way. And I think if you use it appropriately, it can actually be a tool that enhances that group cohesion or that connectedness with your students. You just need to play, like you said, and set up activities in a way that they have to work together. Maybe allow WhatsApp connections as well, have speaking buddies so they send their comments to each other to give feedback. It's really about being creative with the tools we've got.
Yes, there you go, being creative. Actually, another area of teaching and learning that I've always been really interested in is the idea of developing student confidence. Do you think it's actually harder to work on student confidence in an online context?
That's a difficult question, I think, because it, first of all, depends a little bit on what sort of confidence they bring to the classroom or the online classroom already. I do feel, if I reflect on my own practice, that I'm a lot more pastoral in my teaching. There's a lot more positive feedback saying, oh, excellent work together. I really like your comments. Because in the normal classroom, let's say in the face-to-face classroom, I walk around, I monitor, and I hear something from all my students. So when I do feedback, I actually pick up, oh, and Nathan said, and a lovely sentence here, and I heard this. So they know that I hear them, and I might give them some praise for what they've done. Well, if they're in breakout rooms, I can't hear all of them at the same time, right? So I really try to make an effort to give them more praise and positive feedback so they know that I hear them, that they are important for me, that they keep that confidence. Because otherwise they might say, oh, I said this, but the teacher never hears me. She never says anything about what I say. So, yeah.
Confidence goes down a little bit, maybe. Yeah, you're right. It's a difficult question to answer, and it's a tricky one to balance out, I think. But it sounds like you're doing a great job. So, okay, we're running out of time, so I want to move on because we've got two other things that we want to talk about. The first is I want to talk about yourself. Let's move away a little bit from the mindfulness and the well-being. You've been doing this for a long time. I mentioned before you've been living in Dubai for quite a while. You've got your own website. So you're a teacher trainer here. You run Cambridge certified courses. I know you train for Nile. You do CELTAs. But you've got your own website now, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, their website is not new. I've had it for about 11 years, I think. When we were in Sydney, I decided to start up my own company to offer teacher training, particularly in Africa. So lots of free materials, free sessions. But after 11 years, I decided it's probably time for a bit of a refresh. So at the moment, I'm still building it. I've got my main site, a little bit about me. I've got a site where you can find all the webinars and articles and links to all the blogs that I've written. So it's actually, my aim is that teachers can find a place where they can go to for their own development. Because that's my passion, teacher development and then effective practice, which is highly linked to educational psychology and cognitive science, I think, in my case. So my website is there for people to find information, read, develop, but I'm also planning to offer some more bespoke sessions, which I did in the past. I've worked at a few schools in Saudi Arabia with teachers of young learners. Those were the good old days, Nathan. We would fly in and spend 2 days in a room with 20 teachers talking about teaching young learners. I did that as well for IELTS training. And I'm thinking, I should probably try to reboost that and maybe offer that as online training or bespoke one-on-one training for teachers who want to develop in a certain direction.
Yes, nice. The website is teachertrain.org, right? Good.
Correct. Yeah.
So I put it into the, I should have put www on teachertrain. Oh, it still doesn't come up. Anyway, put www on the front of that and put it into the internet and it'll come up. But yeah, I mean, I think people would love to go on there. The blogs are fantastic. I know you've just done some recently, which I went on and read before the podcast. I think people would really benefit from all of the experience and knowledge you have, with teachers and with learners here in MENA, bringing that kind of contextual angle into what you do with teachers here. I think people will really benefit from that. So I would definitely recommend everybody to go and check out Anna's website. So we're coming to the end. Anna, before we wrap up, would you like to suggest any advice or any tips with the listeners of the podcast today around guiding them, I guess, towards integrating or extending well-being in their classrooms? Any kind of top tips?
Top tips, yes. But I think the first one is not so much related to in the classroom. I think the top tip is really that you need to take care of your own well-being as a teacher. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? And if you're not well, if you're not feeling that sparkle or that positive energy, then it's really hard to expect that you get that in your classes as well. So take some time. I hope you've all got a week or something coming up that you can actually just relax a bit and take some time to stop, breathe, and really listen to your own body and your emotions. If you're not sleeping well or if you're stressed, sometimes we have to ignore it because we're just so busy, so much to do in our lives. But those things can start to impact you. So what I suggest for yourself as a teacher is to purposefully plan in or block some time in your diary that's going to be you time. Very simple. Go for a walk, have a cup of tea, speak to Nathan. Do something that actually just can relax you a bit and bring that energy back to you and put a smile on your face.
Yeah. I'll be in Colombia, so if you want to speak to me, there's a 10-hour time difference. But, you are more than welcome, anyone, to reach out to me on anywhere. You can reach out to me on the Facebook group. You can email me. If you've got my number, you can WhatsApp me. I'm always there if people want to talk to me.
And this is, can I jump on that idea then, Nathan? Because I think this is the other thing that we maybe have noticed more now we're working online. I don't know, for me, it's always been important, connecting with others, with other teachers, because you're never alone in what you experience, the stresses in the classroom, the things that don't go well. it's normal. We all have good days and less good days. So find a community of practice that can support you, where you can share your doubts or your worries, but also where you can share that enjoyment, what you get, because I think that is super important. And I love what you're doing with the PD Academy here, because we
Yeah.
are becoming this community that we need in the Middle East.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love that tip, because obviously this is what we've spent 18 months working on. This a platform where teachers can connect with each other. And in the new year, I'll be releasing actually the community aspect of the website, which is I'm really looking forward to. Yeah. So again, and it's going to be about what teachers do, how they feel, what challenges they face, so that people can see that other teachers are just like them. They face the same kinds of challenges. They find disconnecting, in the holidays difficult. They find, asking questions about what we're doing difficult as well. So yeah, I love that tip. So we've got 2 from Anna. We've got look after yourself and connect with others, which I think are perfect tips for developing well-being. I mentioned earlier in the podcast about working together as a team and questioning what we do. And I think a part of that is questioning what we do with relation to how it impacts on our students emotionally. I think we think about coordinating in terms of their learning, but not so much around how the decisions that we make impact on them socially and emotionally. I think that's a really key aspect within social and emotional development. So, and it can be anything, involving students in the process of assessment, not disconnecting them. That's one that I think research has shown that has quite a positive and powerful impact on student performance and outcomes. Another one is around classroom management and behavior. So we set rules. I know there's been, with very young learners, I used to do this. We get them to come up with the rules with us. Yeah, this is one of these kind of familiar practices. But you can actually take that to a kind of more macro level. I was reading the other day about a school in the US, and they're the first school in the US to kind of really challenge this idea of managing student misbehavior. So they've totally changed the focus away from punishment. And this is a really low income, disadvantaged area. I think it was in Baltimore. So if anybody knows the US, Baltimore is one of these, a lot of poverty, a lot of social issues going on there. So basically they've created a meditation room. So if students misbehave, instead of putting them on detention, they get mandatory meditation time. And I think they've got a trained professional there that can help them. But, the idea is about calming them, talking about feelings, talking about consequences, rather than just saying, you were bad in class, you have to stay behind for an hour, and that cycle keeps going on. I think that's what people are starting to realize. I thought that was a really interesting, idea, and it'll be really interesting to see how they research that and what kind of things come out of that. So I would say there's another one: work together and question all the different types of things that we do, and question it from an emotional impact point of view. I think we've got 3 good tips there.
I've got one more, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Based on what you're just saying, I think that reflecting is really important, but also to make kids, teens, but even adults, make them aware of that growth mindset. Things go wrong, but that doesn't mean it's failure. It could be feedback, and that can actually impact how you're going to behave next time in a similar situation. So I think that's really important to make our learners aware of, particularly with assessment, which for some of them is really not the most pleasant experience. So there is no failure. There is just feedback, and take it in your stride, find the positives in it, and then you try again next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's wrap up, because we have gone over time a little bit, but it's great because there's so much that we could talk about around wellness, emotions, mindfulness. It's such a huge topic, and I think it's quite an underexplored topic still.
Great.
In ELT, but also within education more widely, I think. So, of course, you mentioned the MENA PD Academy, which has got loads of professional development support for advancing well-being, and Macmillan Education as well has quite a lot of things. It's, of course, one of our new advancing learning themes. So, there was the webinar last week by Kate Pickering. There's the Advancing Wellbeing Hub on the Macmillan English website. So if you haven't seen that yet, go and check out the Advancing Wellbeing Hub, because there's blog articles, there's other webinars, there's other content there that might give you ideas around this idea of advancing well-being. So go and check that out as well. I mentioned at the beginning that we will send everybody who registered for today's podcast the Advancing Wellbeing Handbook, which was written by Anna Hasper here, who's been joining us. So do check that out as well. I will send that to you probably tomorrow now. Anna, my cup of tea, it was a huge cup of tea, but it's come to an end, sadly.
Same here.
Yeah. So I think sadly today's podcast episode is also coming to an end. I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute honor to have a good chat with you, over a cup of tea about this topic. I know that both of us are really passionate about this topic. Psychology, emotional development. We've had a few lunches where we've tossed ideas around this topic. So it's been great to kind of do it more formally and bring other people into that discussion with us. So thank you very, very, very much. Thank you to everyone who's been joining us in the chat box, and to everyone who attended the podcast today, either if on Facebook or if you've been with us in the Click meeting. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion. And please do go and check out the other ELTea Time MENA podcast episodes on the MENA PD Academy website. There are 7 now. And Anna, you are the 7th.
Lucky number, right?
You're the 7th. What would you call someone who joins a podcast? You're not a presenter. You're a guest. You're a guest. Yeah. You're the 7th guest, but you're also the 7th female guest we've had. We've had all female guests on the show, which is also great. I like that.
Girl power. No, it was a pleasure to be here, Nathan. Thank you for inviting me. And thanks everyone for joining us, because indeed, this is a topic we can probably talk about for hours. There's so much more research for us to do here. No, it's wonderful.
Thank you. For now, though, from Anna and myself, we wish you and your students all the very best for the Christmas and New Year period. We hope that your exams, if you've been doing exams recently, have gone well. And Anna, I think both you and I will look forward to seeing everybody here tomorrow at Macmillan Education's Winter Fair, which is going to be absolutely brilliant. I cannot wait. Of course, the fabulous Ben Crystal will be there with that hypnotic voice of his. But also there's going to be the one on theatrical folklore. I think is going to be really fascinating. But this idea of bringing the creative arts into the classroom, pushing those desks back now that the exams are finished, getting students, what we were just talking about, role-playing, talking, debating, all of these types of things, I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant. For now, though, from Anna and myself, we wish you all a very wonderful afternoon, and we will see you on the next ELTea Time MENA podcast in January. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks very much, Anna, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.